in bloom for me and you.
Good afternoon. Today we're going to talk about a subject near and dear to my heart, something that we see at the clinic quite a bit, and this is about emotions and your attitude and how it affects your health and your immune system, or in other words, the study of psychoneuroimmunology. This is an actual science that came about in the early 1900s, and the studies continue up into this day. It's basically the science of what you think creates in your health, how your attitudes are, how your emotions are. There's always been a theory that it affects our immune system. For example, here's a very important and very old quote. I suggest that the body and soul react to each other in sympathy. A change in the state of the soul would necessarily have an effect on the body and vice versa. That was Aristotle back in 400 BC. Even back over 2,000 years ago, they knew that what you thought actually can occur and make changes in the body. We've known, obviously, for thousands of years, especially as doctors, that happy patients tend to heal much faster than sad patients. Patients with a more positive attitude tend to heal much more rapidly, whereas those with darker or sad or angry attitudes either heal very slowly or sometimes they don't heal at all. No matter what we try to do for them, they don't heal. So I really wanted to take just a few minutes today and talk about your attitudes and how it can affect your health. Anyway, like I said, the name of the science is Psychoneuroimmunology. It has become a very big topic of discussion now amongst neuroscientists, immunology studies, immunology scientists, research facilities. They're all studying this now, a lot of them to a great extent. And the proof finally, even though Aristotle knew about it back in 400 BC, proof finally started to come about in the early 1900s up until the late 1900s, and even now studies are proving it. So what does this mean? Well, in essence, one of the big pioneers in neuroscience, her name was Dr. Candace Patterson. She was one of those that carried the science even further. And this is a quote by her. Our thoughts create our reality. This is a strange concept for many of us. How could what we think possibly make you sick, or well, happy or unhappy? Yet Candace Patterson is a neuroscientist who did a lot of research in the study of neuropeptides. For example, she was also the first one to call them molecules of emotions. What's a neuropeptide? Neuropeptide. Well, a peptide is simply a piece of protein, and they are, for all intents and purposes, information conveyors. They're little pieces of information. Every second that goes by, our brain produces billions and billions of neuropeptides. Every time you think a thought, every time you look at something, every time you feel an emotion, you produce a peptide. And at current studies, there are approximately 90 different neuropeptides, peptides that are actually made in the brain. Well, peptides, again, are information carriers, and they go throughout the body, and they affect a multitude of different biological processes. All right, so some examples of neuropeptides would be endorphins, serotonin, a lot of the neurotransmitters. These are all neuropeptides, and they're obviously affected by emotions. Well, again, for thousands of years we wondered, well, how can what we think affect our health? It was once thought that the brain or the mind was separate from the immune system, that they had nothing to do with each other. Finally, out of a multitude of studies, they finally found the link. So here we go. Every time we think a thought, every time we have a feeling, every time we have an emotion, we produce a shower of neuropeptides. All right, these little protein messengers that then go throughout the body. Well, again, thanks to Dr. Candace Patterson, she was the first one to discover opiate receptors. Receptors are little docking ports, little areas on our cells' membranes, and they're throughout all the body. The receptors are on every cell of our body. And so it's a little docking port. And so, for example, what she discovered with opium or opiates, that whenever they were in our system, they would go dock with this little receptor on the cell, and the cell would then change its behavior based on the information from the opiate. All right, and we know what happens with the opiates. All right, well, from there, it was discovered that there are an extremely large number of receptors, not just for opiates, but for serotonin, for GABA, for dopamine, for the opiates again, for endorphins. The list is huge how many receptors we have. So they literally found that for every type of neuropeptide, there is also a type of receptor on our cells. Okay, so we got that. All right, so then they found out that the neuropeptides, the type of neuropeptides, or the state, because neuropeptides are like little vibrational things that when they connect with the cell, they're this little vibrational, and they change their vibrational state depending on how they were when they were created. So for example, when we think a happy thought, we actually produce a neuropeptide of a particular state. When we think a sad or negative, angry, or hateful thought, we actually produce a neuropeptide of that kind of state. So what they found is that it's the predominant amount of, it's not this is you're happy for a moment or that you're sad for a moment. It's the predominant thoughts or feelings that a person survives with, a person lives with. Is this person predominantly angry? Is this person predominantly stressed or predominantly lonely or hateful? Or is the person predominantly in a happy mood? Gratitude, which is lacked greatly, unfortunately, in today's culture. People have forgotten to be thankful for what they have. So are you predominantly a loving person or a happy person or a grateful person or one with joy? Do you wake up with joy or do you wake up angry? Do you wake up again with joy or do you wake up sad? Is the predominant amount of feelings that you have. There's a study going up in Washington State right now dealing with cancer, and they have found that to a very large extent that those with cancer, and I'm talking about adults, those with cancer have had some kind of trauma in their childhood. Now, I wouldn't say this wouldn't necessarily just in childhood, but I can tell you we deal a lot with cancer at the clinic. And after 20 odd years of practice, I have never, ever once found a cancer patient that did not have some kind of trauma or long-term stress or sadness in their life. Never, ever found a case where it was not the case with that. So cancer very often, except in children, okay, because they've not been alive long enough. But in adults, I have found cancer to be basically a disease of darkness. There is something in their past or something that they haven't resolved to this day, and it literally eats them away. So they found that when you predominantly make one set of neuropeptide states versus another, it will affect your health because, here was the final link, that those neuropeptides, as they're being created, they go throughout the body and they bind on the cells with those receptors. If, for example, if you're a predominantly happy person or positive, joyous, they found that those neuropeptide states, when they bind with the cells in the immune system, that it actually stimulates the immune system. They found, for example, people with depression, long-term depression, that the neuropeptides were binding with the cells and were causing a lower antibody count. Okay, those that were not predominantly or clinically depressed, but were overall happy people, it actually stimulated their antibody counts, and so their immune system was stronger. So the more happy you are, scientifically they found that the neuropeptides change their states, alter the immune system, and the more the immune system is stimulated, the more predominantly dark or sad or unhappy or angry or hateful that you are, the more medically it actually suppresses the immune system. So depending on your overall attitude is a very good predictor of what your overall health is going to be like. It is very easy in the clinic when someone comes in there and you do an intake on them and you're talking to them, and we usually spend about an hour with each new patient when they come in. We get a pretty good idea of what's going to happen. Now, it's not fair to say that we completely know all about that patient in the first hour, but we pretty much have a pretty good idea what this patient is going to be like over the long haul, because they either come in with some kind of hope in their heart and they're willing to try to do what it takes and to work with their emotions and their attitudes, or they're not. And very often, those that just are still connected to their sad stories, they have not been willing to let them go yet. They have not resolved past issues. They're not willing to let go yet. It rarely works out with them. because their immune system will stay suppressed and they will not heal, or it will take a very, very long time. All right, so one of the biggest things that you can take from this is become aware of your habitual thought patterns. Thoughts do create reality. I know this sounds easy and airy-fairy, but simply go online, look up the study of Psychoneuroimmunology. Short is PNI. Look it up. It is an exact science. It is growing. It is well respected. Studies at Johns Hopkins, at Harvard, multiple universities around the world are studying the science of PNI. And we're finding that attitudes do change your immune system. So it's easy to, for me to tell people that you try to find the joy, try to find the happiness in your life. One of the biggest things we do with our cancer patients from their very first appointment is tell them, besides the treatments that you can undergo, one of the most important things you can do is find joy in your life. Try to find joy, try to find happiness. And I just recently had a patient in my office, and he said that he has lost himself. He just cannot find it. And I know this sounds airy-fairy and easy again to say, but I told him, I said, sometimes happiness is just a decision that you make. And I know, again, people will come back and go, well, that's easy for you to say. You're a happy person. And I like to say I'm a very happy person. Okay. But it's still, there comes a time when we have to decide, are we going to live in joy or are we going to live in sorrow? All right. Live in joy. Try to find the joy. And again, study after study shows those patients that turn their lives around, even in the midst of illness and cancer, being told they had stage 4 cancer, they changed their attitudes. Yes, they followed the program, but changing their attitudes, we've seen such a difference in the healing rate and the success rate in patients that found joy. So sometimes joy, happiness is just a decision you make. You can get up tomorrow morning, you can stay in your sad stories, where you can go, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to be happy today. I'm going to try to be happy, even if I have to fake it, because eventually it can become a habit, and it can become real, and it can change your life. So go study PNI, go look it up. It is a science that shows that, yes, what we think, what we believe can change our lives, can change our health. That means that that disease that was thought incurable can heal simply because we start to believe it can happen, and we find the joy in our life to do that. All right? Well, it was a joy for me to be able to pass this message on to all of you. I hope it does some listener out there some good to hear this, to know that they can change their course just by the way they think. All right? All of you have a most joyous and blessed rest of the day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Let me bring you songs from the woods to make you feel much better than you could know.